All right. Welcome back to the Dirty Hands of the Republic. We're going to talk today about the Chavez shooting where the officers were reinstated. So we've learned that Sergeant Benjamin LeBlanc, officers Luis Alvarado, Patrick Rubio, and Omar Tapia have been reinstated. Sounds good to me, I think.
Oh, yeah. Much to
the chagrin of the chief of police. He did not sound very happy about it on his little press conference.
He looked like he was giving some kind of tragic news.
Yeah.
To me.
So just want to say good afternoon to everyone. I want to start off by saying, understand this is a difficult day for the Chavez family. I ask that our community continue to pray for them. Just want to say on the up front, there's ongoing litigation with this case. The family is represented by counsel. My remarks will be very limited today. I have briefed the mayor, who's out of town on city business. I've also spoken to numerous community members, leaders I meant to say, and also activists. The officers appealed the suspension to an independent hearing examiner. Chapter 143 of the Texas Local Government Code affords officers the right to appeal the chief of police decision. The burden of proof is on the city to prove by preponderance of evidence that each officer violated rules and policies cited in the letters of the indefinite suspension. After consideration of the evidentiary record, it was ruled that the city did not prove by preponderance of evidence that each officer violated the rules and policies cited in the letters of indefinite suspension. Pursuant to the ruling, officers must be reinstated. Although I was not the final decision maker when officers were indefinitely suspended, I believe that there was evidence of policy violations. A call to the community. It's a difficult time for, I stated, the Chavez family, our department, and our community.
And so when you listen to the way they're addressing what happened both in the shooting and then obviously in the arbitration and reinstatement of these officers, one of the things they're talking about is their training and that they followed their training and the city could not convince the arbitrator or arbiter really that they deviated so much from their training that they violated policy. So since this is a training question, and I do think that, obviously once the suspect gets into the possession of the taser, in a previous video we discussed how that creates the apprehension or fear of serious bodily injury or death. But more importantly, serious bodily injury. I guess, tasers can hit you in the eye, they can hit you in the neck and cause blindness or, some kind of disability.
Well, in that case, they were all standing around close to Chavez, who had attempted to hurt the officers, had something in his hand, threw something at the officers, and they all had their weapons out around the officer.
Right.
Well, if he tases you and you go down, your gun's not in your hand and you're in close proximity.
Right.
So you're going to drop your gun.
Okay. So, clearly. All right. So that kind of is what constitutes the apprehension or fear of serious bodily injury or death. Now, back to the training, though. What about their training is it that they followed and this you don't believe the city could prove they deviated from as to why they won their arbitration?
Well, Acevedo said that they followed the training, but he couldn't justify that many shots.
Is this captured in 600-17, or where exactly is the training that they're discussing?
Well, like we talked about last time, 600-17, the use response to resistance or the use of force. It's written subjectively, like I say, so you can give it a happy ending however you want. Okay? They can determine it however they wish. If you look in our videos, it's the review of Art Acevedo's leadership in our video library, and I break down the Chavez shooting, okay, minute by minute, and show you where they did the de-escalation. They tried to talk him down. They use less lethal beanbags, taser, all this stuff to no avail. And he kept on, and he even said that he wanted to die.
Okay.
Okay, this man was determined to die. He had been shot one time with a pistol, shot numerous times with beanbag guns, and tased.
So do you think this is more akin to a suicide by cop
Well,
situation?
it's exactly what it was. He said, I'm an MMHRA patient, whatever it is, I forget, but the
MHMRA.
MHMRA,
Yeah.
and I'll feel like dying. He said it right there. And suicide by cop is a real thing. Because they know if you point a gun at a police officer, they're going to shoot you.
Okay.
The guy may not have the guts to do it or whatever, but suicide by cop is a real thing. And I believe that's exactly what happened here.
So is there a class specifically that officers are given where they discuss either the retention of the taser or the loss of the taser to a suspect, or, a person holding a taser towards the officer?
Yes. What the officer put the taser down. And the reason he put it down was because people were becoming entangled in the wires, because it's got two little wires that attach to the darts that go out. Okay. Well, he had been tased and the wires were going everywhere and people were tripping over him. Not a good thing to do in a tactical situation. So he threw the taser down so people could walk over him. That's not something that you train to do, but it was a smart idea. What they don't train to do, which is to take the cartridge out of the taser. Nobody knows how to do that. Not to say nobody. I know this for a fact because I took out thousands of cartridges out of tasers at the qualification range when we would have to check their functionality every year. Thousands. I know how to take it out, and it just takes a second, and they don't teach them that. Once you've deployed it, you can take them out, and then you can holster the thing. Okay, that's something that they don't teach.
So it's not part of the regimen of training at the police academy when officers are either in the academy as cadets or when they come back for some kind of continuing education training course?
It wasn't when I retired, no. And I know it wasn't because if it was the training, then everybody failed it, because I don't know how many times people would say, take out the darts. And they would look at it. I'm like, oh, okay, here, let me have that. And I most of the time we'd just say, hand me your taser. And then we would take out the darts because nobody knew how to take them out. And it's not that difficult, but you got to learn how to do it.
So that is something they should add to the training.
I did. When I told them during the function test, okay, this is how you put it in and click it in. This is how you take it out. It's real simple.
And just for the audience, as a reminder, Joseph, my partner here, he actually trained officers face-to-face, sometimes one-on-one. So he's speaking strictly from experience as to his interactions with officers about how that training is actually conducted from the person or one of the people who actually conducted the training. Do you think that is something they'll add to the training?
They will now when they see our video.
Okay.
There's a lot of I know that the academy has pushed for time, okay, because they only have 6 months
right
to teach you. The genders alone to memorize those is like got to be at least 2 months. Okay. So they have so much ridiculous stuff that they have to teach.
Right. So perhaps less diversity training and more tactical training would be helpful.
I would, silly me.
I
would think so.
Okay, yeah. So it would probably behoove the department to maybe go back and look at its training schedule and try to remove the superfluous and replace it with the tactical.
I think so. I believe this gap in the training started years ago. Do you remember the incident at the Chinese consulate? Okay, where the officer jumped on the Chinese guy's back. He was a member of the consulate, and they had a fight outside. The officer he jumped on the Chinese guy right outside the consulate. Okay, and it was an HPD officer, and there was a captain that gave a class after this was over, and he said, "I had to get him for something. I had to get him for something," which I was like, "What? You were ordered like Stalin? Show me the man, I'll show you the crime." I didn't understand that statement. I had to get him for something. unless there was nothing to get him for.
Yeah, that's very Kafkaesque.
Yeah, exactly. It really is. So he goes, I had to get him for something. So I asked if he was trained to jump on somebody's back. And they said no. And so that's what they deemed him for. Doing something he wasn't trained to do. That's why I see it and saw it.
What year was that? Do you remember?
No, I certainly don't. But I saw it in the training and when I was assigned at the academy, and I was an instructor. Also, I always tried to play the bad guy at the scene scenarios.
Right.
So I could see what the cadets were doing, and they were so ingrained in cover, getting by their car, and only following exactly and precisely the procedures laid down by the police department. Okay, which means, I mean, in the old days, the officers out there with the Chavez did not do anything wrong. Okay, they followed their training, the procedures to the letter. What would happen when you and I were there? One of us would have talked to him, the other would have tackled him from behind, right? We would all dogpiled him.
Yeah.
Well, they've taken that out because you're not trained to tackle anybody, are you? No, you didn't get a class. Remember the first time you caught somebody running?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you get a class from the minute that that had to do with when you latch onto somebody, how to take them down?
So I took a grappling course back in 1998. I remember this very well. And they taught me how to fight. And, and so there was, because, they do the red band training at the academy where they're supposed to be teaching you how to fight, normally with an impact weapon in your hand, either a nightstick or a flashlight.
Yeah.
And how to kind of engage your suspect who's, got all the red padding on.
Yeah.
That's why they call him the red man, because, just for the audience's sake, that's kind of the only real physical confrontational training that you receive in the academy. And I found it woefully inadequate.
It was one time.
Yeah.
That was it.
So afterwards, I think about 3 years after I left the academy back in 98, they started offering a grappling course where they even taught me how to choke someone out. And that was actually part of the class, was learning how to choke someone into unconsciousness. And I was like, okay, they should be teaching this in the academy. Because believe it or not, sometimes that's a useful tool.
Well,
and you'll never know when you need it. But when you need it, you absolutely positively need it. When you're trying to get somebody under control that is trying to either hurt, severely injure, or kill a third person, and you're just the officer coming up behind them, and you don't want to just kill them. You don't want to just pull your weapon out and put a bullet in their head. The ability to choke someone out into unconsciousness for just a couple of seconds, long enough to get them handcuffed and their ankles secured, however that happens, but their wrists and their ankles are secured so they can't kick, punch, fight. You've got them under control, and then you've been able to save the health or life of this other third person.
You didn't have to shoot them.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's an exceptionally useful tool for police officers to be able to do. And unfortunately, from what I understand, in the last, say, 15 years, they've taken that away.
Oh yeah, choke. You said a bad word, chokehold. That's verboten.
But I did actually use that when I was at the department. After I took that class, on a few occasions where
you use it in a report.
It was normally where a spouse was in a fight with another spouse with their spouse at an apartment, say, off of Gulfton or Glenmont, like Napoleon Square apartments, and you would be called to a family disturbance, and it was still in progress when you got there, and someone was reaching for a weapon while they're on top of someone else, and there's kids running around, there's other family members running around, and you don't want to just pull your weapon out and start shooting, but this person's life is in danger. And one of the tools that you can use in that situation is the ability to incapacitate someone for just long enough that you can get them physically secured and off of their spouse or neighbor, family member, whoever it is they're attacking. And normally they do it when they're intoxicated, right? And that was what I dealt with a lot in 17 District, which, Southwest Houston.
Yeah.
And I found that to be very useful, a very useful tool. So
It is.
it vexes me why the department, in an effort to prevent officers from having to kill people, takes away from them tools that can help officers not kill people but still get them under control.
Well, my point was when they disciplined the officer for jumping on the guy's back, and they had to discipline him because it was an international incident. That's why they had to discipline him. Okay, so that for one thing, that's not fair. Okay, they disciplined him for doing something he wasn't trained to do. Well, my point was, you weren't trained to grab somebody, and then what do you do after you grab them and you're running? They don't say you do this, you sweep your leg here, do this, you just grab them and tackle them, right?
So there's just a severe lack of training.
Well, no, you don't need to teach somebody to tackle somebody. Okay, have you ever?
It might help. I think it would help.
I know, but you don't have to. And officers cannot use a dog pile anymore, okay, because they're not trained to do that. They're not trained to run up and tackle somebody. They're not trained to reach up, to come up and slam them on the ground and to defuse the situation, because they have this certain protocols that they're afraid to do anything outside their training. That's why they backed off and he had something in his hand they thought was a knife. Okay. And he looked like he was trying to cut himself. He was pretending like.
I remember. This is the beginning of the video.
Yeah. And so they thought he had a knife, and I see all these comments on these people make against the officers in YouTube and all the news stations. These cowardly officers couldn't. 6-8 officers couldn't overpower one guy.
And that was the media's version of the event. That's not. It's certainly not our version of the event.
Exactly.
That was the media's narrative.
Well, and the people talk about how they were cowards because they shot him because all he had was a knife. Well, to you people, I will say, I'm sure the last time somebody had a knife, you handled it differently. Okay. The last time you were called to a place to subdue somebody that you didn't know with a knife, I'm sure you handled it much better. Okay. But you don't understand what happens with a knife is it never jams. Okay. It always works. It takes no skill to mess you up with it.
And it's very painful.
And it can cause serious bodily injury or death. No one wants to jump on somebody with a knife. Now, there's batons, all this other stuff, but they're all intermediate weapons. And there's hands-on to tasers, and anything in between is an intermediate weapon.
So there's some part of the antiseptic training that I've noticed with departments is when you go through taser training, for example, you all stand around and everybody stands around and they tase the officer or the cadet, and they've got one person on each side of the person who catches them and lays them down on the mattress. But that's the beginning and the ending of the training.
Yeah.
There's no training I've ever witnessed where you're actually fighting with a suspect, you tase that person, they're incapacitated for 5 seconds, right? Because that's how long the charge lasts, or that's how long the taser lasts. And then what do you do after that? Right. But
there's an intermediate weapon.
Yeah. Well, now you're on top of the suspect trying to handcuff the suspect you've just tased. Do you keep tasing the person? And I think there needs to be some form of training where officers, cadets included, learn what to do after you've tased the suspect, because they don't just lay down on a mattress and wait for you to handcuff them.
Never.
Right. But there's no training to help officers to divine what to do once you've shocked someone with a taser. And that there's kind of these gaping holes in the training that I've never understood, and I've tried to discuss when I was at the department with both people at the academy and people in the chain of command, and when I was on that EEOC, that what was it? Representative Employment Council.
Oh yeah.
ERC. And I would bring it up with the captain, and if an assistant chief ever happened to show up, I would try to say, well, what about, we could use some training on, and no was always the answer. No. It's just training is like the last thing the department wants to spend money on for some weird reason. But there's other more important things like overtime they'd rather spend their money on, or I don't know, you name it. But there are kind of these holes in the training that I really think whoever's running the academy needs to sit down, and they really need to get serious about what it is they're trying to get officers to do. And if the job of the officer is to be a social worker who is more focused on diversity and inclusion than how to physically resolve a violent confrontation with a suspect, then I think the department is just going to look at future lawsuits from here to eternity. No police department I can ever find has ever been sued because they didn't spend enough time training people on diversity and inclusion, or gender studies, or gender equality, or any of that nonsense.
Yeah, the training has just gotten ridiculous.
But departments have gotten sued a whole lot over use of force. So it just seems to me that if we're going to budget our time properly, we're going to spend most of our time trying to resolve those issues that are most likely to resolve or result in lawsuits. Use of force, wrongful death, or use of force that leads to death. Those kinds of equations, those kinds of calculations made by officers on a daily basis are the ones that they really need to spend more time training on than anything else.
Well, to get back to what I was saying about what he's talking about, the ineffectuality of the intermediate weapon. Okay, the taser.
Right.
All intermediate weapons are ineffectual. There's not one that works that well. Okay, they're not designed to work that well. There's no way to make a something that you tase them. Now you're driving home with your the report's done, your overtime slip filled out. Okay, no, you tase them, or you spray them with pepper spray, or you hit them with a baton. You still have to handcuff them. They're still not going to be compliant. So we got to stop relying on these intermediate weapons as much as hands-on by police officers. The one of the most effective is the world's oldest weapon, the stick.
Right
now called a baton. Okay, it's a very effective weapon, intermediate weapon. But once again, it is only as good as the officer using it, or as the training he has, or is the resolve of the suspect. Okay, I've never seen one suspect yet that could have the resolve to resist 6 officers. Okay, they squirm, they fight, but with 1 or 2, sometimes 3, but 6 officers, dog pile, force the hand behind their back, and I don't mean jerk it, but everybody just use some force, how we used to, and put their hands behind their back. Nobody can resist a dog pile of officers.
Yeah, so just one of the things I hope people who are not police officers, or maybe who are police supervisors watching this video might understand is the more you take options away from officers to resolve a situation without having to shoot someone, because it has always been my experience that it's never the suspect de-escalating the encounter. It's always the officer trying to de-escalate the encounter. So these encounters always ever seem to escalate. And as the department removes options from officers to physically intervene and take custody of a suspect, the more likely they are to make a shooting occur.
Exactly.
And if at the end of the day, we're going to complain about the number of shootings officers are involved in, perhaps the best solution is to give officers more options to prevent the shooting in the first place when they arrive at the scene, when they're encountering the suspect, when they're trying to physically take the suspect into custody, which is going to cause a fight. It's going to be a fight. We shouldn't be afraid of officers fighting suspects. And so we should try to give our officers every conceivable advantage in a physical confrontation with suspects so that they don't have to wind up shooting people. But the more we take options away from officers, the more likely we are to make a shooting. take place. And that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Certainly.
So thanks for joining us here today on the DHR. And we look forward to seeing you again. Please subscribe. Please like the video. And we'll see you next time.